Disclaimer: all of the equipment by Moza Racing in this video was sent to me by Moza Racing for testing and review. However, this has no effect on my opinion or what I say in this review. I do not receive money from Moza, nor does Moza have any influence on what is shown or discussed in this video. My opinions, thoughts and findings are my own. With that out of the way, enjoy the video.
If I may, I shall start this video by stealing a quote from another YouTuber. The great thing about the world today is that your average Joe has access to some of the finest foods the world has to offer. Filet mignon or a nice sea bass cooked in rock salt with a nice splash of olive oil. And then to wash it all down, you side with a nice fancy bottle of champagne. And that's all great. But sometimes what you really want is a big greasy cheeseburger with a few pints of cold beer. Simple, unpretentious food done well. And that is exactly how I can describe this. So let's get right down to business and get into what this shifter has to offer. The Moza HGP is a 7-speed H-gated shifter and uses an anodized aluminium body to hold it all together. And that's it really. And that's okay, because it doesn't need to be anything more than that. A shifter isn't supposed to be something that sits on your rig going, "Oh, look at me!" Instead, a shifter is meant to sit on your rig quietly, out of the way, and feel like you're receiving a handshake from an old friend. So, the HGP is simple, but is it simple and done well? We'll get the basic stuff out of the way straight away. And more often than not, the basic stuff is actually some of the most important stuff. So how does the shifter feel in your hand? What is the grip like? Well, some of you already know, I have very small hands. So it's got to be the right size for everybody. And I have to say, from just the feeling alone, the size of the shifter is pretty much spot on. It feels very, very comfortable. And the good thing is that it doesn't feel like it's getting in the way at all. It just feels very natural. And that's what you want, really. You don't want anything that's just too attention grabbing or distracting. It's like, wow, that has a big, I was going to say knob, but we'll gloss over that one. And while we're on the subject of size, the whole unit itself is actually tiny. It's really, really small. It's not so small that you think, oh my goodness, I'm going to break this thing immediately. But it's small enough that it would also work as a desk-mounted shifter. This shifter isn't just for, cockpits and full-blown racing rigs. You can use this thing on a desk comfortably. It is literally just the right size to be a perfect all-rounder for all people. And I like that they're thinking that way, because some other shifters are like really big and bulky, and they weren't built for desk users in mind. This shifter, however, pretty much bridges that gap together, and I have to say it's excellent. It's perfectly sized. The action that you get on the HGP shifter is also just sublime. Moza haven't just shoddily put this together to make a quick buck out of you guys. They've actually put a lot of thought into how this feels through your hand. Every shift and movement is sharp and detailed. You feel every single gear. It is a great feeling. But don't be fooled into thinking that because it's such a detailed feeling that it's just going to feel very light and flimsy, because it simply doesn't. Now, depending on what feeling you want from your shifter, this only really has one feeling, and that is heavy signal box. And that is exactly how I personally want a gearbox to feel like. Just heavy, thunky. Genuinely love the way that this shifter feels. This is such a good, it's got such good action on it. It really feels like you are shaking hands with an old friend. It is that satisfying to just pull a gear out and slide another one in. Absolutely marvelous job on this thing. Now, because it only has one feel to the gearbox, that means that there is no adjustability of the firmness or the strength of the spring inside. So what comes out of the box is what you get. Now, some may see that as a problem, especially if you're wanting a lighter feel to the gear stick or you want a heavier one. But for me personally, they've nailed it. The feeling out of the box is absolutely spot on. And while we're speaking about the out of the box experience, look at it. It is absolutely splendid to look at. But it's not in your face. It's sleek, handsome and modest. And just look at the H-gate on the top. It's wonderful. Right now I am driving a classic. I am driving a Shelby Daytona. Possibly one of the prettiest cars ever made. One of. And this is where pure immersion really settles in, because I just look to my left and the pure, proper H-gated pattern is right there staring at me, and I feel right at home driving something like this. I wonder if you can actually hear the shifter as well, because that, weirdly enough, adds a bit of immersion as well. If I just dip the clutch, you can hear it's got like a two-part sound to it. It's like a doof, and then you're aware. Watch, I'll go from third to fourth. Ready? Oh, I love that! As it pops out of gear into neutral and then back into another gear. I just love that. I never thought in a million years I'd be complimenting the way a shifter sounds when it changes gear. Listen. That's really satisfying. Now, I can spend all day bigging this shifter up, talking about how crisp the shifting feels and just how nice it looks. The truth of the matter is, none of that is particularly game-changing, or even remarkably innovative. But once you start digging a little further, this shifter has some gems hidden behind it. Now, while I've got your attention, it is worth talking about a certain feature that I have never seen before when it comes to having a shifter. And while it is a fairly innovative bit of development, it's still very simple. Now, if I may, I'm going to turn your attention to the Moza Pithouse software. Now, this feature that I'm about to show you does require you to have Moza branded pedals in order for this to work, which I do have, but unfortunately I don't have them attached to my rig right now, as I'm testing other pedals for a further review. But I'm still going to show you this. If you look up here, you'll notice something called Auto Downshift Throttle Blip. Now, if you don't know, this is actually quite important, especially if you are a person that likes to race with manual gearbox cars, like with a clutch pedal and a shifter. Because if you don't blip the throttle, then you're going to lock up the back wheels and you're going to spin, and thus requires you to learn how to do heeling and towing. Now, if you don't know how to do that, or you're just uncomfortable with that, this kind of, bypasses that in a way. So when you have this enabled, when you dip the clutch and change gear, the software will detect that and automatically blip the throttle so it will apply revs to your car, meaning you won't lock up the back wheels so easily. Now, that is a fantastic bit of innovation, especially if you're learning and getting started in sim racing, especially with a manual gearbox. Now, some games like Assetto Corsa have that built in, but some games don't have that. So if it is one of the games that you like to race with, that is a great little bit of software that they've implemented. Moza, that gets a thumbs up from me, and I think that's a brilliant bit of development. And all of this can be yours for $150. That price point is pretty much unmatched when you take into account the build quality and performance of this shifter. While yes, you can go on Amazon and pick up $99 shifters or $70 shifters, but if you do that, you are sacrificing a great amount of quality. Some of those are even 3D printed, and you can even see the plastic that they use. Whereas with the Moza HGP, it is all metal, it is extremely well made, and the performance outdoes all of them. This is a job well done from Moza. Unfortunately, this has put it in the firing line of the industry's largest competitor. The Club Sport SQ shifter is the daddy of all shifters, because it does everything. It looks very similar to the Moza, or I should say the Moza looks very similar to it. It also has a full metal body construction, but the Fanatec has the ability to be side mounted, which the Moza does not have. You can also opt in to have different shapes of gear knob, depending on what car you're driving and what feel you want through the gear knob. But crucially, with the Fanatec you are able to adjust the firmness and stiffness of your gear shifting. But the biggest thing the Fanatec has over the Moza is it is both a 7-speed H shifter and a sequential shifter. And this is Fanatec's smoking gun. Fanatec does seem to be holding on to its crown of the most popular premium shifter. But before we take the HGP shifter around the back of the shed and shoot it, just hold on a moment. The Moza is $150, but the Fanatec is $270. The Fanatec is $120 more expensive. For that money, you could buy the HGP shifter and the HGP handbrake that Moza offer, and still you would have $20 to spare. But people will get hung up on the fact that the HGP does not have sequential. And you know what? So what?
So what if it doesn't have a sequential mode on it? It doesn't matter, because when you actually stop to think and look at it, this is $150. When you consider that price difference, the sequential shouldn't even come into question. And if you think about it, what other shifter has both sequential and H pattern? As far as I'm aware, there's only two. One is obviously the Fanatec, and the other is the Thrustmaster. But frankly, the less said about that shifter, the better. The action on the Thrustmaster is dreadful, and there is no feeling whatsoever when it comes to its sequential mode. This is just such a satisfying shifter. I'd even go as far as saying this does H pattern better than the Fanatec. It's true, I have the Fanatec shifter. While the Fanatec shifter does have its advantages over the HGP, and I do mean they are very significant advantages, at the end of the day, what do you buy a shifter for? Shifting. The H pattern shifting on the HGP, I'd say it was the new benchmark. And while, yes, you can adjust the resistance of the H pattern on the Fanatec, there's a few problems that I've found with it. Chief among which is it wears fairly quickly. If you like your change action to be fairly firm and stiff, the Fanatec, while brilliant at first, the firmness wears away after an amount of time. And even when it doesn't feel like it, doesn't feel as crisp or as sharp as the Moza. Because even when the Fanatec is on a firm setting and it hasn't worn off, there's no real, sharp action with it. It feels like I'm slotting in a stick through some powder. But if sequential shifting really does matter to you, and it is very important to some people, myself included, then by all means buy the Fanatec. It's a brilliant shifter. But if you just want H pattern, this is the one to go for. It is much, much, much cheaper, and the H pattern is the new benchmark. And that's all I'll say to that.
In conclusion, yes, it's an easy recommendation. The build quality and price point is pretty much spot on. While it doesn't have the sequential shifting option, the quality of the H pattern shifter itself more than makes up for it, especially considering that it is $120 cheaper than Fanatec's option, and still $50 cheaper than Thrustmaster's option, and that shifter isn't even half the quality of this one. So yes, 100% this gets my recommendation. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed your time here, then please hit that like button, and if you're new to this channel and want to see more reviews like this, then do consider hitting the subscribe button, because we do review a lot of products on this channel. Not to mention, if you want to buy either the Moza shifter or the Fanatec shifter, then both my affiliate links are down in the description below, and if you do use them, then that will compensate me and help me out greatly. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you guys in the next review. Have a good night, everybody.